Hello, my name is Dizzy and I'm a full stack developer, and I'm going to be taking you on a very simple topic today called creating a simple button with HTML and CSS. Alright, I know that many of you may have started HTML and CSS and you'll be finding it very difficult. Well, I'm just here to simplify a little bit of it for you. Alright, so from time to time I'm going to be doing random solutions on different components from HTML, CSS, React, Node.js, and so on. Alright, so but for today I'm going to be creating a simple button with HTML and CSS. So if you've started coding, you already know what HTML is and CSS, but just for clarity, HTML is simply hypertext markup language, and CSS is cascading style sheet. So in other words, HTML is simply creating the components, while CSS is used for styling that component. Alright, so let's go right into it. We have taken quite some time talking. Let's go right into it. So what we're going to be using is that we're going to be using Replit. Alright, and Replit is a very strong and powerful online platform where you can write different codes in different languages. You can write in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can write in Node.js, you can write in React, you can write in Python, you can write in Python with Tkinter, you can write in a lot of languages on their platform. Alright, and it's easier because you're not going to be installing a lot of things on your laptop. Everything is just online, and the interesting part is that whenever you write any code, anybody in the world can actually visit that URL where your code is and see what the output is like. Alright, so let's just try that now. So I'm just going to type Replit on my browser, Replit. Alright, and we'll open that, and it's most likely going to be the first suggestion there. Alright, so you see Replit, a collaborative browser based IDE. Alright, that's a development environment. Alright, so let's go. I'm going to open that. So if you have not created a Replit account, go ahead and create that, because it's a very good way to start coding. Alright, and you can have all of that without much of a time. All you need is an email address and then a password. Alright, but me, I just sign in with Google and it's easy for me that way. Alright, so I have recent languages, blah blah blah, and all of that. But today I'm just going to create a new repo, and that will be on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Alright, so all I need to do now is to come up here. I'm going to come up here and click on create new repo. Alright, so create repo. Okay. So we want to create a new repo, and creating a repo, you're going to select the language and also give it a name. The interesting part is that you can also host from here to GitHub, and you can also pull from GitHub and write your code here. It's just like having your computer online. Honestly, as developers, you need a really fast laptop, but if you're using Replit, part of the problem is already solved. Alright, so let's go. So I'm going to be using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript because I'm going to be coding with HTML and styling with JavaScript. Alright, sorry, I'm going to be creating the components with HTML and styling with CSS. So let me just give it a name, simple button. Alright, and this naming method can be called the Pascal's case. Very close to the camel case, but it's called the Pascal's case. Alright, so I'm creating a new repo now. It's going to take a while, but when it comes up, it's going to be worth it. Alright, so while it's loading, let me just use this opportunity to tell you more about HTML and CSS. So HTML, all HTML does is that it deals with tags. Alright, everything in HTML is actually a tag. You want to write a text, there's a text tag. You want to make a heading, there's a header tag. You want to put a link, there's a link tag. You want to put an image, there's an image tag. Everything in HTML actually has a tag. Alright, now for you to design a particular component that you've created in HTML in CSS, you need to use what we call a selector. All right, and that selector can be an ID or a class. All right, so I don't know how far you've learned in HTML and CSS, but today let's try to follow along. We're going to be creating a simple button and styling it to fit. All right, so all I need to do now, you see, I have index.html, I have script.javascript, the JS, and I have style.css. So I always want to start from my index.html. If you're really crazy about coding, you can start from the CSS, because wow, that means you really know what you want to do. But let's just start from the HTML and then we'll style it with CSS. All right, so you can see we already have a basic setup of what the HTML looks like: the doc type HTML, the head, the body, the script, and all of that. All right, so without writing any code, REPL gives us a simple code which says hello world. All right, and I'm sure that will make you happy a little bit, all right, because you don't need to write anything and you already have hello world. All right, we're going to take away that hello world and write something of our own. All right, so it's done loading now. All I need to do is to click on run. So once I click on run, I should see hello world somewhere here. You see? Yeah, I have hello world right here. All right, so all I want to do is to put these in a div so that when I'm styling, I can style the div so that it will be centered, and then everything will go to the center. All right, so I'm just going to create a tag here. As I'm teaching you this, I'm just hoping that you already have a basic knowledge of HTML and CSS. All right, so I just want to show you how to create a button perfectly. All right, so I'll put one here, and actually there's a shortcut for it, but that's just, I'll do that when I'm creating the button. All right, so if I put this, you're not going to notice any difference. All right, you're not going to notice any difference because a div is just like a container that tries to house whatever you put in there. All right, so let's create our button now. The button, we're going to create it under the hello world text. So in here, I'm just going to write, this is my button. This is my button. My button. All right, and then under that, let's create our button tag. Remember, I told you that everything is a tag. You see, it's even created a button tag right there. All right, so let's go to the next line. I'm going to type button, and you see I have Emmet abbreviations right there. I'll just press enter, and then boom, I have a button tag. So now if I run this, I'm just going to see a very small shape right there. All right, it's like an empty button without any text. All right, you can see it's just somewhere here right around the corner. So it's like an empty button without any text. So let's say let's just write send on the button. All right, and if I run this again, you see that the button now looks healthy. All right, the button now looks healthy. You see, so this is my button send. All right, so now we've created a button. Let's try styling it. So I want to create a green button with a white text on the button, and it should have some nice edges and all that. And also when I hover over the button, it should give me some kind of change of texture and all of that. All right, so let's go right into CSS. So normally when you're styling, the CSS should be linked to the HTML file you're referring to. All right, but Replit already does that for us, so we don't need to bother about that anymore. Just go straight to CSS and let's style. So the first thing you want to do in CSS is to create your body. All right, to create your body. All right, to create the body. To create the body, and yes, everything should be in small letters. So create the body, and I'm going to do that. And usually what I do in the body is just to set the margin to 0 and set the padding to 0. Those are just the two things I like to do so that my page doesn't go about dancing and all of that. All right, now the next thing I want to do is to style the button. All right, now I didn't use the selector. Why? Because I only want to style one component. If I had a full website that had a lot of components, let's say we have up to like 3 different buttons, then I have to create selectors that are going to refer to each button differently. Alright, but now I can just go to my CSS and write button and then put my styles there. No issues. Alright, that's because it's just one button, and even if I had multiple buttons, I want all of them to look the same. Alright, so let me just decide to create a second button by copying what I have on line 12 and pasting it on line 13. So look at this. If I run this, let me just change the text on the second one to receive, all caps, should be receive. Alright, so if I run this now, you see we have send and receive, alright, and they're just like side by side. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is let's try to style it. So the next thing I want to do is let's try to style it. So I'm going to go to CSS now. I'm going to say my selector, button, and remember I'm referring to all the buttons on my page. If I didn't want to do that, I can use ID or class. Alright, so let's pad it a little bit first. So I'm going to say pad this button, so padding. I'm going to say all round. I want to pad it all round, not just by the left or by the right. We'll learn about padding the sides later on. Alright, so I just want to pad it from all directions. So I'm going to say 20 pixels. Alright, and then I'll close it. And then if I run this, you see that our button is going to look a little bit bigger. Alright, yeah, it looks a little bit bigger. So I think the 20 pixels is too big also. So let's just reduce it to like let's say 5 pixels. That makes it look better. Alright, that makes it look better. Yeah, so now the next thing I want to do is to change the background color of the button. Alright, so I'm going to say background color. Yeah, see, options are already coming out. Background color, and let's make it let me try to give a color code, but I'm not sure of the color code, so let me just say green, or let me say dark green. I hope it's going to give a color like that. Yeah, so dark green. I'm going to close it, and let me also say color. Remember I said background color, and now we're talking about color, so color should be white. Alright, so we have dark green and white. And also when I run this, you now see that we have a green button with white text on it. Interesting, right? Now if you look at the button carefully, you see that it looks nice, but we have these lines around the edges that are making it look crazy. Alright, so those lines are actually the borders. Alright, so I'm just going to create a new stuff, and I'm going to say border, and I'm going to say the border should be 0. Alright, I don't need to put any dimension since it's 0. So 0 is 0 in all units. Alright, so if I run this now, you see the border is out. So we have a nice rectangular button. Now the edges of our button are too sharp. They are too sharp. Alright, so let's add a little bit of curve at the edges. So I'm going to say border radius. That's for adding some nice curves at the edges. So border radius, let's say 3 pixels. So I'm going to say 3 pixels. If that doesn't work, we'll try something bigger. But that should work. Okay, loading. Yeah, so it looks a little bit better now. Alright, so what else? Yeah, so now you can see the way the button is. We have the send and we have the receive, but now it's not really looking like, it's looking like a button, but it doesn't feel like a button. Like when I hover over it, nothing happens. It's just looking like, oh, just one of those things. Alright, let's try to take the button to the center. So remember the div I brought in then? and the button is inside the div. The two buttons are actually inside the div. I'm just going to say div, and what am I going to tell the divs? I want to tell them to actually have a width of 100%, have a width of 100%, and after having a width of 100%, I can't say height of 100% because 100% is relative. Percentage is relative to whatever it's talking about. All right. So I'm going to say height. I'll just say the height should be like 300 pixels. All right. So I'm going to say the height should be like 300 pixels. Now the height is 300 pixels. The next thing I want to do is to run this, but we might not still see any changes. All right. So usually when I want to see what I'm doing with a div, I usually give a background color so that I see what is happening. All right. So the next thing I'm going to put is a background color, which I'm going to remove later. All right. That is like the cheat code I use when I'm creating components this way. Even on React or whatever front end language I'm using at any point in time, I always want to put a background color to see what it's like. So you can just put an abstract color, something that you know that you're going to see when you run your code. All right, so now I should see a yellow, and I should see it at a very big size. All right, yeah, so it's something like this. All right, so the next thing I want to do is to bring in what I call the flex box, which is kind of tricky. A lot of people have issues with it, but that's going to be for another day. But I just want to do this quickly. All right, so display flex, that's how you call the flex box. The next thing you want to do is to say justify content center. Okay, you always end every line with semicolon. And align items, I also want it to be center. All that does is that it takes the components to the center vertically and horizontally. So it takes it to the center of your div, not your page, the center of your div. All right, so center. And if I run this now, you see that my button and my everything goes to the center. In fact, everything goes to the center. Yeah, so everything goes to the center. So I can just say instead of center on justify content, you can see the buttons and everything are joined together. I can say space evenly. All right, space evenly. So that makes it look more reasonable. All right, if I run this now, that should be nice. So while it's running, the next thing I want to do is to say what should happen when we hover. All right, the button should be a button. And let's try to see what it's like when you hover. All right, so all I'm going to do is to copy all of this for the button and then paste it. All right, and now I think I can remove this background color here so that the page doesn't look so odd. All right, now next thing we want to do is to, where you have the button, the second button styling that I just copied and pasted, you're just going to put your colon, and then you're going to put hover. All right, you're going to put hover. So that means when you hover over the button, what's going to happen? All right, so now the styling for the button and the button hover are the same, so nothing is happening. But let's say I change this from dark green, I just change it to green, for instance. Let's say I just change it to green, and I run my code. Look at what, okay, let me change it to green yellow because dark green and green look alike. So green yellow, look at what's going to happen. The button looks okay. When I hover, it changes to green yellow. Can you see that? All right, quite interesting, right? So we can do it in such a way that we'll use a color that makes sense. So I'm just going to hover here, and let's say let it be gray when I hover, and the text should be black. All right, yeah, so let's gray with an AY, background color gray, and then the color should still be white. Every other thing, we can even make the button increase in size when you hover over it. Does that make sense? So any style you put here now works on the component upon hover. Alright, so run this, and if I hover now, you see it changes. Alright, which looks very, very nice. Alright, you can even change the font size when you hover. Font size, so it looks like it's reducing or something like that. So font size when I hover should be 15 pixels, and for that to be effective, I also need to change the font size before I hover. Alright, so let's make that like 20 pixels or 25, yeah, so that you notice it really well. That means the button is going to really go up and down when you hover. Alright, so running this now, let's see what the output is going to be like. You see, bigger buttons, and when I hover, it goes a little bit smaller, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that. Alright, so let's reduce this a little bit to, let's say, 17, so it doesn't look so outrageous. Alright, so if I run this now, everything should look better. So now, in the hover, anything I'm not changing, I can just remove it. So I'm going to take away the padding, I'm going to take away the color, I'm going to take away the border radius and the border, because the only two things I changed there was the background color and the font size, and it's going to work perfectly. Alright, so let's test it out. You see, reduce a little bit, just like that, just like that. Alright, so I hope you have been able to learn how to create a simple button with HTML and style it with CSS. Now there are a whole lot of things you can do to your button. You can make your button to be bigger, you can make it to be wider on one side, you can make it to stretch upward or just sideways. You don't need to pad it all around. Let me show you how to do that. You can say padding top, padding left, padding bottom, padding right. Alright, but you can also use a shorthand of padding, which we write this way. So the first one is referring to up, so I'm going to say padding up, let it be 5 pixels, and then padding left and right. If I don't put the 4 details, the one in the middle refers to left and right. So let me say padding left and right should be 15 pixels, and then padding bottom also 5 pixels. So top and bottom 5 pixels, left and right 15 pixels. You can learn about shorthands in CSS. Alright, it's going to help you go a long way, but maybe I'll take a course on that one day. So you see, the buttons look a little bit wider, right? So if I make this let's say 25, you see that only getting wider while the top remains at 5 pixels. So I hope this makes sense to you, and I hope you enjoyed the course. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if you enjoy what you just saw. I'm going to bring you more coding content to you. See you next time.